Memorial Day was originally known as Decoration Day, when the graves of those who fell in the Civil War on both sides were decorated with flowers wherever the graves were located. On May 30th, 1868, the first official National Decoration Day was held at Arlington Cemetery, where the first military burial, that of Private William Henry Christman, had taken place 4 years previously. Today, the 13 people who have died in our current war, 10 are buried in their hometowns, and 3 are buried in Arlington. General James A. Garfield, elected president in 1880, gave the first speech on Decoration Day.
I am oppressed with a sense of the impropriety of uttering words on this occasion. If silence is ever golden, it must be here beside the graves of 15,000 men whose lives were more significant than speech and whose death was a poem, the music of which can never be sung. With words we make promises. Plight faith, praise virtue. Promises may not be kept. Plighted faith may be broken, and vaunted virtue may be only the cunning mask of vice. We do not know one promise these men made, one pledge they gave, one word they spoke. But we do know they summed up and perfected by one supreme act the highest virtues of men and citizens. For love of country, they accepted death, and thus resolved all doubts and made immortal their patriotism and their virtue. For the noblest man that lives, there still remains a conflict. He must still withstand the assaults of time and fortune, must still be assailed with temptations before which lofty natures have fallen. But with these, the conflict ended. The victory was won when death stamped on them the great seal of heroic character and closed a record which years can never blot.
About 35 years later, President Theodore Roosevelt spoke these words on May 30th of 1902.
On this day, the 30th of May, we call to mind the deaths of those who died that the nation might live, who wagered all that life holds dear for them in order that the mighty national structure raised by the far-seeing genius of Washington, Franklin, and the other great leaders of the Revolution, the great framers of the Constitution, should not crumble into meaningless ruins. You whom I address today, and your comrades who wore the blue beside you in the perilous years during which Lincoln bore the crushing load of national leadership, performed the one feat, the failure of which to perform would have meant destruction to everything which makes America a symbol of hope among the nations of mankind. You did the greatest and most necessary task which has ever fallen to the lot of any men on this Western Hemisphere, the task of saving the Union. You left us a reunited country. You left us the right of brotherhood with the men in gray who also, with devotion for what they deemed the right, fought against you. You who made good by your valor and patriotism the statesmanship of Lincoln and the soldiership of Grant, have set as the standards for our efforts in the future both the way you did your work in war and the way in which, when the war was over, you turned again to the work of peace. In war and peace alike, your example will stand as the wisest of lessons to us and to our children and our children's children.
In 1984, following 2 world wars, President Ronald Reagan included these remarks in his Memorial Day address.
Throughout America today, We honor the dead of our wars. We remember that they gave their lives so that others might live. We are also gathered here for a special event, the national funeral for an unknown soldier from Vietnam, from the Vietnam War, who will today join the heroes of 3 other wars. The unknown soldier who has returned to us today and whom we lay to rest is symbolic of all our missing sons, and we will present him the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration we can bestow. About him, we may well wonder, as others have. As a child, did he play on some street in a great American city? Did he work beside his father on a farm in America's heartland? Did he marry? Did he have children? Did he look to expectantly return to a bride? We will never know the answers to these questions about his life. We do know, though, why he died. He saw the horrors of war, but bravely faced them, certain that he was fighting for human dignity, for free men everywhere. Today we pause to embrace him and all who served us so well in a war whose end offered no parades, no flags, and so little thanks. While the experience of Vietnam has given us a stark lesson that ultimately must move the conscience of the world, we must remember that we cannot today, as much as some might want to, close that chapter in our history. The war in Southeast Asia still haunts a small but brave group of Americans, the families of those still missing in combat. They live day and night with uncertainty, with an emptiness, with a void we cannot fathom. They cannot rest until they know the fate of those they loved and watched march off to serve their country. We write no last chapters. We close no books. America's involvement in Vietnam cannot come before we have achieved the fullest possible conclusion, the certainty of what the fate was of these America's sons.
Marking the 150th year anniversary of Arlington, President Obama spoke this to the gathered crowd.
Today we recognize the 150th anniversary of this holy space, Arlington National Cemetery. 150 years ago, war raged on hillsides and farmland not far from where we gather today. A nation ill-prepared for war found itself overwhelmed with the task of burying so many of its sons. So, we declared upon this hill a final resting place for those willing to lay down their lives for the country that we love. And on a spring day in 1864, Private William Christman of Pennsylvania was the first American to find eternal rest on these grounds. Here, in perfect military order, lie the patriots who won our freedom and saved the Union. Here, side by side, lie the privates and the generals who defeated fascism and laid the foundation for an American century. Here lie the Americans who fought through Vietnam and those who won a long twilight struggle against communism. And here, in Section 60, lie men and women who gave their lives over more than a decade of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. For the parents who have lost a child, for the husbands and wives who lost a partner, for the children who have lost a parent. This day and this place are solemn reminders of the extraordinary sacrifice they have made in our name. For these families and for their comrades in arms, Their service to our nation endures. There are few who truly understand what it means to send a child into war or to watch a battle buddy give his life to save others. On this Memorial Day, and every day, these are the families and veterans we're sworn to look after. The fallen patriots we memorialize today give their last full measure of devotion. Not so we might mourn them, though we do. Not so that our nation might honor their sacrifice, although it does. They gave their lives so that we might live ours. So that a daughter might grow up to pursue her dreams, so that a wife might be able to live a long life, free and secure, so that a mother might raise her family in a land of peace and freedom. Everything that we hold precious in this country was made possible by Americans who gave their all. And because of them, our nation is stronger, safer, and will always remain a shining beacon of freedom for the rest of the world.
And finally, we're going to circle back to a man who was neither a general nor a president. On May 30th, 1871, Frederick Douglass, in the company of President Ulysses S. Grant, spoke at the monument to the unknown dead of the Civil War.
Tarry here for a moment. My words will be simple. There is in the very air of this resting place of the unknown dead a silent and all-pervading eloquence, far more touching and impressive than living lips have ever uttered. The unknown heroes whose bones have been piously gathered here reached in their glorious careers that last highest point of nobleness beyond which human power cannot go. They died for their country. When the dark and vengeful spirit of slavery, preferring to rule in hell than serve in heaven, fired the Southern heart and stirred all the malign elements of discord, when the union of these states was torn and rent asunder at the center, and the armies of a gigantic rebellion came forth with broad blades and bloody hands to destroy the very foundations of American society, these unknown brave ones who flung themselves into the yawning chasm where cannon roared and bullets whistled, fought and fell. They died for their country. We are sometimes asked in the name of patriotism to forget the merits of this fearful struggle and to remember with equal admiration those who struck at the nation's life and those who struck to save it, those who fought for slavery and those who fought for liberty and justice. I am no minister of malice. I would not strike the fallen. I would not repel the repentant. But may my right hand forget her cunning and my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth if I forget the difference between the parties to that terrible, protracted, and bloody conflict, which filled our land with widows and orphans, which has made stumps of men of the very flower of our youth, which has sent them on the journey of life, armless, legless, maimed and mutilated, which has swept uncounted thousands of men into bloody graves and planted agony at a million hearthstones. If this war is to be forgotten, I ask, in the name of all things sacred, what shall men remember? If now we have a united country no longer cursed by the hell-black system of human bondage, if the Star-Spangled Banner floats over free American citizens in every quarter of the land, and if our country has before it a long and glorious career of justice, liberty, and civilization, we are indebted to the unselfish devotion of the noble army who rest in these honored graves all around us.
And to conclude, if you have served in our military in any capacity and are willing to stand, or at least raise your hand, we would like to recognize you this morning.